The subway station smelled like wet concrete and desperation. Rain dripped from my coat, forming small puddles at my feet as I clutched my sleeping 3-year-old daughter closer to my chest. Emily's warm breath against my neck was the only comfort in this cold October evening, her small body heavy with exhaustion after our long day. "Just 2 more stops," I whispered against her soft curls, shifting her weight to my other arm. The muscles in my shoulders screamed in protest, but I'd gotten used to the pain. Single motherhood wasn't for the weak. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the nearly empty platform. That's when I saw him, Patrick, stumbling down the stairs at the far end, his eyes wild and searching. My heart rate doubled instantly, a cold sweat breaking out across my forehead despite the chill. 3 months since I'd escaped. 3 months of looking over my shoulder, changing our routine, moving to a smaller apartment in a different neighborhood. 3 months of peace, shattered in an instant. I turned away quickly, my mind racing. Emily was asleep. I couldn't run without waking her and causing a scene. Patrick had never been violent with her, but he'd never forgive me for disappearing with his daughter, even if he'd shown little interest in her when we were together. The child support checks he occasionally remembered to send weren't worth the emotional toll of keeping him in our lives. "Emma." His voice echoed against the tiled walls, slurring my name. Drunk again. Some things never changed. Without thinking, I stepped behind the broad shoulders of a man standing a few feet away, pretending to study the subway map on the wall. Up close, I caught the faint scent of expensive cologne, something woodsy and subtle that seemed oddly out of place in this dingy station. The stranger wore an impeccably tailored black overcoat, his dark hair closely cropped at the sides but slightly longer on top. From my hiding place, I could see his strong profile, a straight nose, defined jawline, and eyes so dark they appeared almost black under the harsh lighting. "Emma, I know you're down here." Patrick called again, his voice closer now. The stranger shifted slightly, his body tensing. I noticed for the first time that he wasn't alone. A few feet away stood another man, broader, with watchful eyes constantly scanning the platform. The way he positioned himself, always maintaining sightlines to the exits, struck me as unusual. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the stranger's back, not expecting him to hear me over the rumble of the approaching train. "I just need to—" He turned then, his eyes meeting mine. Something cold and calculating flashed across his face before it was replaced with an expression of polite concern. My breath caught in my throat. He was handsome in a dangerous way. Not conventionally attractive, but magnetic. Power radiated from him like heat from a fire. "Problem?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. Before I could answer, Patrick spotted me, his face contorting with anger as he pushed through the small crowd that had gathered to wait for the train. "You can't keep running, Emma," he shouted. "You can't keep my kid from me." Emily stirred against my shoulder, whimpering softly. Panic rose in my chest. The last thing I needed was for her to wake up and witness this. "My ex," I explained hurriedly to the stranger. "He's drunk. I just need to get on this train without a scene." Something shifted in the stranger's expression. He glanced at Emily, then back at my face, seeming to make a decision. "Mikhail," he said quietly, and the broader man moved closer, positioning himself between us and Patrick without any further instruction. The train screeched to a halt before us, doors sliding open. The stranger placed his hand lightly against the small of my back, guiding me forward. "Get on," he instructed, his voice leaving no room for argument. I stepped into the car, my heart pounding as I heard Patrick's angry shouts behind us, followed by what sounded like a scuffle. The stranger entered behind me, followed by Mikhail, who moved with surprising grace for his size. The doors closed just as Patrick broke free, his angry face the last thing I saw before the train lurched forward. "Thank you," I managed, clutching Emily tighter. "He's harmless, really. Just persistent." The stranger's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Few drunk men shouting at women and children can truly be called harmless. I noticed how the car had emptied around us, passengers subtly shifting to other sections despite the crowded train. The stranger didn't seem to notice or care. He gestured to a vacant seat. "Sit. Your arms must be tired." It wasn't a suggestion. I sat, arranging Emily across my lap, her sleeping face pressed against my coat. The stranger remained standing, one hand casually holding the rail above me, while Mikhail positioned himself by the doors, his gaze constantly moving between the other passengers and the stations we passed. "I'm Emma," I offered, feeling I owed him at least that much. "Alexander?" he replied after a moment's hesitation, as if deciding whether to tell me his real name. "The man who helped us is Mikhail." "Us." An odd choice of words that sent an inexplicable shiver down my spine. "And your daughter?" he asked, his eyes softening slightly as they rested on Emily's sleeping face. "Emily. She's 3. I hesitated, then added, "She doesn't see her father much. It's complicated." Alexander nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. Family often is. The train slowed as we approached the next station. I realized with a start that we'd passed my stop during the confusion. "I need to get off at the next one," I said quickly, gathering my purse and adjusting Emily in my arms. We missed our stop. Alexander studied me for a long moment. "Is your ex likely to be waiting at your usual station?" The question caught me off guard. He was right. Patrick knew our routine well enough to guess where we'd be going. "I hadn't thought of that," I admitted. "Then perhaps you should reconsider your destination for tonight." Something in his tone made me look up sharply. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something I couldn't quite place. Concern? Interest? Calculation? "We'll be fine," I insisted, standing as the train slowed. "Thank you again for your help." As I moved toward the doors, Emily's small pink backpack slipped from my shoulder, spilling its contents across the floor of the train. Crayons rolled in every direction as I tried awkwardly to kneel without waking my daughter. Alexander moved with unexpected swiftness, gathering the scattered items and returning them to the bag before I'd even managed to shift Emily to a better position. As he handed me the backpack, his fingers brushed against mine. They were warm, the skin slightly calloused in places, working hands despite the expensive coat and air of authority. "Thank you," I said again, suddenly aware of how close he was standing, how his scent, that subtle cologne mixed with something uniquely him, enveloped me. "You're welcome, Emma," he replied, my name sounding different in his mouth, important somehow. The doors opened, and I stepped onto the platform, expecting him to remain on the train. Instead, both Alexander and Mikhail exited with me, flanking me like some sort of security detail. "What are you doing?" I asked, alarmed. "Ensuring you get home safely," Alexander said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a stranger to escort a woman he'd just met. "That's really not necessary," I protested, even as my eyes darted around the unfamiliar station. This wasn't my usual stop, and the late hour meant the platform was nearly deserted. "Perhaps not," Alexander conceded, "but it would ease my mind. It's not safe for a woman alone with a child at this hour." Before I could argue further, Emily woke with a small, confused whimper. She lifted her head from my shoulder, blinking sleepily at Alexander. "Who's that, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small and drowsy. "This is Alexander," I said carefully. "He helped us when Daddy was being loud on the platform." Emily studied him with the frank curiosity only children possess. "You're tall," she declared. Something remarkable happened then. Alexander's face transformed entirely as he smiled at my daughter. A genuine smile that reached his eyes and softened every hard line of his face. For just a moment, I glimpsed a different man beneath the intimidating exterior. "And you're very observant, Emily," he replied gravely, as if speaking to an equal. My daughter beamed at him, instantly charmed. I felt a pang of unease. Emily had always been a good judge of character, but something about Alexander screamed dangerous, despite his current gentleness. "Where do you live?" he asked, turning his attention back to me. "East Riverside," I said reluctantly, naming the neighborhood, but not my specific address. Alexander nodded, then looked to Mikhail, who immediately pulled out a phone and stepped away to make a call. The practiced coordination between them struck me again as unusual. "My driver will take us," Alexander said, not asking but informing. "Us?" I echoed, a note of panic creeping into my voice. "Look, I appreciate your help, but—" "Emma," he interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Your ex knows which station you use. He knows your neighborhood. Tonight he's angry and drunk. I'm offering you and your daughter a safe ride home." Put like that, it was hard to argue. Still, I hesitated. Why would you do that? You don't know me. Alexander considered me for a long moment before answering. Let's just say I have a particular dislike for men who terrorize women and children. There was something in his tone, a hardness, a history, that made me believe him. Against my better judgment, I nodded. Okay, thank you. We exited the station to find a sleek black SUV already waiting at the curb, a driver standing beside the open rear door. The windows were tinted so dark they appeared almost solid black. Mikhail opened the front passenger door and slipped inside, while Alexander gestured for me to enter the back. I climbed in, settling Emily beside me on the soft leather seat. Alexander followed, sitting across from us rather than beside me, giving me space. The interior was luxurious, but subtle. Dark leather, polished wood accents, and more legroom than I'd seen in any car before. East Riverside, Alexander instructed the driver, who nodded without speaking. As we pulled away from the curb, Emily's eyes grew wide with wonder at the car's interior. "Is this a princess car?" she whispered to me. Alexander chuckled, the sound unexpectedly warm. "Something like that," he said. I studied him in the dim light from passing street lamps. In this setting, his wealth and power were even more apparent. The coat I'd admired earlier was clearly bespoke, as was his suit. A platinum watch gleamed at his wrist. Subtle, not flashy, but unmistakably expensive. "What do you do, Alexander?" I asked, curiosity finally overcoming my caution. "I'm in business," he replied vaguely. "Investments mostly, family business." Before I could ask further questions, my phone rang, Patrick's name flashing on the screen. I declined the call, but it immediately rang again. "He won't stop," I sighed, silencing the device. "He'll be sorry tomorrow, promise to do better, then disappear for weeks until he needs something or feels guilty enough to send money." Alexander's expression darkened. "The father of your child should provide consistent support, not occasional charity when it suits him." There was something almost old-fashioned about his values, at odds with his obvious modernity in other ways. "Life rarely gives us what should happen," I replied, stroking Emily's hair as she leaned against me, her eyelids growing heavy again. "Perhaps not," Alexander agreed, his gaze intensifying. "But sometimes life gives us opportunities to change what is." I had no idea what he meant by that. But something in his tone sent another shiver through me. Not entirely unpleasant this time. The car slowed as we entered my neighborhood. The contrast between the luxury vehicle and the modest apartment building stark. I directed the driver to stop a block from my actual building, still cautious despite the strange trust I'd placed in Alexander. "Thank you for the ride," I said as the car stopped. "And for earlier. I don't know what would have happened if—" "Emma," Alexander interrupted, reaching into his coat. He produced a small business card, plain white with only a phone number embossed in black. "No name, no company. If you ever need help again, with anything, call this number, day or night." I took the card, my fingers brushing his again. "I can't imagine why I would keep it anyway," he insisted. "I'd like to know you and Emily are safe." The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. There was something magnetic about him, something that made me want to lean closer even as my instincts warned me to run. Emily chose that moment to look up at Alexander, her small face serious. "Thank you for helping my mommy," she said with the solemn gravity only a 3-year-old could muster. Alexander smiled at her again, that transformative expression that revealed glimpses of a different man. "It was my pleasure, Emily." As I gathered our things and prepared to leave, Alexander made no move to exit the car. "Aren't you getting out?" I asked, confused. "My driver will wait until you're safely inside," he explained. I nodded, suddenly uncertain what to say. This bizarre evening felt like something from a dream, or perhaps a warning. "Goodbye, Alexander, and thank you again." "Until next time, Emma," he replied, as if certain our paths would cross again. I stepped out of the car with Emily in my arms. The cool night air a shock after the warmth of the SUV. As I walked toward my building, I could feel his eyes on my back, watching until I disappeared inside. Only later, as I tucked Emily into bed and prepared to sleep myself, did I realize I'd never told Alexander my last name or anything about my life beyond the barest details, yet somehow, I was certain he would know everything about me by morning. What I didn't realize was how drastically my life would change from this single, chance encounter with a man whose world was about to collide with mine in ways I could never have imagined. Morning light filtered through my thin curtains as I prepared Emily's breakfast, the events of the previous night feeling increasingly surreal. Had I really accepted a ride from a complete stranger? A stranger who, despite his polished appearance and impeccable manners, radiated a dangerous energy I couldn't quite define. "Mommy, can we ride in the princess car again?" Emily asked, stabbing cheerfully at her pancake pieces. I smiled, wiping syrup from her chin. "I don't think so, sweetie. That was just a one-time thing." "But I liked Alexander," she persisted, with the tenacity only preschoolers possess. "He had kind eyes." Kind wasn't the word I would have chosen. Intense, calculating, observant, yes. But kind? The fact that my daughter had seen something in him that I hadn't was unsettling. "Eat your breakfast, Em. We need to get you to daycare, and I can't be late for work again." My job as an administrative assistant at Riverside Medical Center barely paid the bills, but the health insurance was good, and the hours let me pick up Emily before the daycare's late fees kicked in. Today I had a mountain of filing waiting for me, and Dr. Winters had warned that one more tardiness would result in a formal reprimand. As I rushed through our morning routine, my phone buzzed with a text from Patrick. "We need to talk. I'm sorry about last night. Let me see Emily this weekend." I ignored it, shoving the phone into my purse alongside Alexander's mysterious business card, which I'd contemplated throwing away at least 3 times since last night. Something had stopped me each time. Curiosity, perhaps, or the lingering memory of feeling inexplicably safe in his presence, despite every warning bell going off in my head. The daycare was bustling with activity when we arrived. Miss Jen, Emily's favorite teacher, greeted us with her usual warmth. "Someone's been waiting for Emily," she said, gesturing toward a little boy with glasses who was arranging blocks in meticulous rows. Zach saved the red blocks especially for her. Emily squealed with delight and ran to her friend, her backpack bouncing. I watched her for a moment, marveling at her resilience. Despite the instability of our life, the move, Patrick's inconsistent presence, my constant worry about money, she remained joyful, making friends easily and finding wonder in small things. "She's doing great," Miss Jen assured me, reading my thoughts. "You're doing a wonderful job with her, Emma." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks. I'm trying." "Oh, I almost forgot," she added, lowering her voice. "There's been a change in our scholarship program. Your tuition has been covered for the rest of the year." I blinked at her in confusion. "What? How? I didn't apply for any scholarship." Miss Jen checked her notes. "It's an anonymous donation specifically for working single parents. The director selected a few families, and yours was one of them. Isn't that wonderful?" A suspicion formed in my mind, but I dismissed it as paranoid. There was no way Alexander could have arranged this overnight. It was simply a fortunate coincidence, the universe finally cutting me a break. "That's amazing. Please thank the donor if you can." I left the daycare with a strange mixture of relief and unease. The scholarship would save me nearly $800 a month, money I desperately needed but hadn't dared hope for. The hospital was already humming with activity when I arrived, just 2 minutes before my shift. I slipped into my desk and began sorting through the massive stack of patient files that needed digitizing. My mind kept wandering back to the strange events of the past 24 hours. Around lunchtime, my coworker Tara stopped by my desk, her eyes wide with excitement. "You'll never guess what I just heard," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder to ensure we weren't overheard. Dr. Klein's practice was just bought by some big medical group. They're bringing in all new equipment, doubling the nursing staff and offering higher salaries. I raised an eyebrow, not seeing how this affected our department. "Good for them, I guess?" "No, you don't understand," Tara insisted, leaning closer. "They're restructuring the entire hospital administration. There are rumors they're creating new positions with better pay and benefits. You should apply. You've been here longer than almost anyone in admin, and you have a bachelor's degree." I shook my head. "I I can't risk changing positions right now. I need stability for Emily. Just think about it, she urged before hurrying back to her own desk as our supervisor rounded the corner. By the time I left work, exhaustion had settled into my bones. Patrick had called 3 more times, and I'd finally texted him agreeing to meet in a public place tomorrow to discuss visitation. Anything to stop the incessant calls. The subway platform was crowded with evening commuters. I scanned the area nervously, half expecting to see Patrick lurking nearby, or, more irrationally, Alexander watching from the shadows. The train arrived packed with passengers, and I squeezed inside, clutching my purse tightly against my side. 2 stops before my destination, the train suddenly lurched to a halt. The lights flickered ominously before stabilizing at half brightness. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a technical difficulty," announced the conductor's voice over the intercom. "Please remain calm while we resolve the issue." Groans echoed through the car. A delay now meant I'd be late picking up Emily, incurring both late fees and her disappointment. I checked my watch anxiously as minutes ticked by with no further updates. After 20 excruciating minutes, I made a decision. I'd get off at the next stop, whenever that might be, and call a rideshare service, expense be damned. When the train finally crawled into the next station, I pushed my way out onto the platform and pulled out my phone. The rideshare app showed a 15-minute wait time. Frustrated tears pricked at my eyes as I calculated the mounting late fees. That's when I remembered the card in my purse. Alexander's number, given with the explicit instruction to call if I needed anything. This wasn't an emergency, not really, just a working mother's everyday crisis, but the daycare closed in 30 minutes, and I was still at least 45 minutes away. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed the number. It rang only once before a man answered. Not Alexander, but Mikhail, his voice instantly recognizable. "Yes," he said simply. "This is Emma, from last night," I said hesitantly. "Is Alexander available?" There was a brief silence, then 1 moment. I heard muffled voices, then Alexander came on the line. "Emma," he said, my name sounding like both a question and a statement. "Is everything all right?" "I'm sorry to bother you," I began, suddenly feeling foolish. "The subway broke down, and I'm going to be late picking up Emily. I shouldn't have called." "Where are you now?" he interrupted, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. I told him the station name, then added, "Look, I don't even know why I called." "I can get a rideshare. A car will be there in 3 minutes," he said. "Where does Emily need to be picked up from?" I hesitated, then gave him the daycare address. "But I should be the one to—" "The car will take you there," Alexander assured me. "I'll make a call to ensure they know you're on your way." "How would you do that?" "Emma," he said, a hint of amusement coloring his voice. "Trust me on this. Check the street east of the station exit. Black SUV, same as last night." Before I could respond, he'd ended the call. I stood frozen for a moment, stunned by the efficiency and wondering what kind of man could arrange transportation faster than a dedicated rideshare service. True to his word, when I reached the street, the same black SUV from the previous night was already waiting. The driver, a different man from before, but with the same alert, watchful demeanor, opened the door for me without a word. As we pulled into traffic, my phone buzzed with a text from Miss Jen. "No rush, Emma. The director extended hours today. No late fees. Take your time." A chill ran down my spine. How had Alexander managed that? And more importantly, why was he helping me? A random woman he'd met on a subway platform. We arrived at the daycare with 5 minutes to spare before the newly extended closing time. Emily was the last child there, contentedly drawing pictures with Miss Jen in the otherwise empty classroom. "Mommy!" she exclaimed when I entered, running to hug my legs. "Look what I made for Alexander." She thrust a crayon drawing toward me, a figure in what appeared to be a black coat standing next to smaller figures that presumably represented Emily and me. My stomach twisted uncomfortably. "That's very nice, sweetie. Why did you draw Alexander?" "Because he helped us," she said simply, as if it were obvious. "And Zach said his daddy left too. But then his mommy found a new daddy who stays forever. Maybe Alexander can be my new daddy." Miss Jen gave me an apologetic look over Emily's head, They were talking about families today, she explained quietly. I nodded, gathering Emily's things while trying to process this new development. My daughter had met this man exactly once, for less than an hour, and already she'd cast him in the role of potential father figure. The thought was simultaneously heartbreaking and alarming. Time to go, Em, I said, taking her hand. Say thank you to Miss Jen for staying late. After Emily's dutiful thanks, we headed outside where the SUV still waited. The driver opened the door without comment, and I hesitated only briefly before helping Emily inside. This was becoming dangerously routine. Back to East Riverside? The driver asked, his first words to me. Yes, please, I replied, then added impulsively, Is Alexander expecting a report? The driver's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. Mr. Volkov values efficiency and completion of tasks, ma'am. Volkov, a Russian name. This new piece of information resonated with something half-remembered, a news story perhaps, or a name overheard at the hospital. I couldn't quite place it. Emily chattered happily the entire ride home, detailing her day with the rapid-fire enthusiasm of a 3-year-old. I responded automatically, my mind still turning over the mystery of Alexander Volkov and his inexplicable interest in our welfare. When we arrived at my apartment building, I thanked the driver and reached for my wallet, though I suspected the offer would be declined. The service has been paid for, ma'am, he confirmed, confirming my assumption. Please thank Mr. Volkov for me, I said formally. And please tell him that while I appreciate his help today, I don't want to take advantage of his generosity. The driver nodded once, his expression suggesting he would relay the message exactly as stated. As Emily and I entered our building, Mrs. Petrova, our elderly neighbor, waved us over. She was a kind woman who occasionally watched Emily when my regular childcare fell through. Emma, dear, she called in her heavily accented English. A package came for you. The delivery man asked me to sign for it. She handed me a small, elegantly wrapped box, tied with a simple black ribbon. There was no card, no shipping label, just my name written in bold, precise handwriting. Thank you, I said, tucking it under my arm as Emily tugged me toward our apartment door. Inside, after settling Emily with her favorite cartoon and a small snack, I finally examined the package. The paper was expensive, the kind used in high-end boutiques. With trembling fingers, I untied the ribbon and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a phone, the latest model, sleek and clearly expensive. A note accompanied it, written on heavy cardstock in the same bold handwriting as the package. Emma, for emergencies and peace of mind. My number is programmed as the only contact. The service is secure and paid for indefinitely. I stared at the device, emotions warring within me. On one hand, the gift was presumptuous, excessive, and frankly, a bit intrusive. On the other, as a single mother constantly worried about safety and accessibility, having a dedicated emergency phone held undeniable appeal. But the question remained, why? Why would a clearly wealthy, powerful man take such an interest in a struggling single mother and her daughter? What could Alexander Volkov possibly want from us? My phone, my regular phone, buzzed with another text from Patrick. We need to talk tonight. I'm coming over. I texted back immediately. No. We agreed to meet tomorrow. Emily's already in bed. A lie, but a necessary one. The last thing I needed was Patrick showing up at my door, especially in the strange mood he'd been in lately. His response was immediate and angry. You can't keep her from me. I know my rights. I didn't bother replying. Patrick's rights had never concerned him before, not when Emily was born, not when she'd spent 2 nights in the hospital with pneumonia last winter, not during any of the countless milestones he'd missed in her 3 years of life. As I prepared Emily's bath, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was shifting beneath my feet. Alexander Volkov, with his intense gaze and unexplained resources. Patrick, suddenly demanding the fatherhood he'd never embraced. The mysterious scholarship, the medical group buying the practice at my workplace, the expensive phone sitting on my counter. None of it made sense, yet all of it seemed somehow connected. Threads of a pattern I couldn't yet discern. Later, as I tucked Emily into bed, She handed me the drawing she'd made. "Can you give this to Alexander, Mommy? To say thank you for the princess car?" I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "I don't know when I'll see him again, sweetie." "You will," she said with a child's unshakable certainty. "He's going to help us. I dreamed it." A shiver ran down my spine as I kissed her goodnight, out of the mouths of babes, as the saying went. I had no idea how prophetic her words would prove to be, or how soon I would find myself caught between two dangerous men, one from my past, one potentially in my future, with my daughter's well-being hanging in the balance. The coffee shop bustled with Saturday morning activity, providing the public setting I'd insisted on for meeting Patrick. Emily sat beside me in the booth, contentedly coloring in her book, oblivious to the tension radiating from my rigid posture. "He's late," I muttered, checking my watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "Who's late, Mommy?" Emily asked without looking up from her drawing. "Your daddy," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "He wanted to see you today." Emily's crayon paused mid-stroke. "Is he going to yell again?" My heart constricted. "No, sweetie. And if he does, we'll leave right away." The bell above the door jingled, and Patrick strode in, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on us. He looked better than he had on the subway platform, clean-shaven, wearing a button-down shirt instead of his usual t-shirt, his dark blonde hair neatly combed. The effort was noticeable and immediately suspicious. "Emmy!" he exclaimed, sliding into the booth opposite us. "Look how big you've gotten." Emily regarded him with cautious politeness. "Hello, Daddy." The formal greeting from our 3-year-old seemed to momentarily deflate him. He'd missed so much of her life that she treated him like a distant relative rather than a father. "I brought you something," he said, producing a small stuffed unicorn from his jacket pocket. Emily's eyes lit up as she accepted the toy. "Thank you," she said, immediately showing it to her existing stuffed rabbit. "Look, Hoppy, a new friend." Patrick turned his attention to me, his expression shifting to something more calculated. "You're looking good, Emma." "What do you want, Patrick?" I asked quietly, mindful of Emily beside me. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I want to be part of Emmy's life again. I've changed." "Like you changed the last 3 times?" I countered, keeping my tone even despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "You show up, make promises, disappear for months. She deserves better." "It's different now," he insisted. "I've got a new job, good money, stability." I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Patrick's employment history consisted of a string of bartending gigs interspersed with longer periods of mysterious income sources I'd never asked too many questions about. "What kind of job?" "Security consultant," he said, puffing up slightly. "For Northeast Capital Group." The name niggled at something in my memory, but I couldn't place it. "And this sudden career change has inspired your renewed interest in fatherhood?" Patrick's expression hardened slightly. "Don't be like that, Em. I've always cared about Emmy. Caring isn't the same as being present," I replied, "or paying child support consistently." "That's going to change," he said firmly. "In fact, I want to talk about changing our arrangement. I'd like regular visitation, every weekend." I stared at him, stunned by the audacity. "Every weekend? Patrick, you haven't seen her in 3 months before this. Let's start with something more realistic." "I have rights," he insisted, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. "I'm her father." "Biology doesn't make you a father," I said quietly. "Being there does." Emily tugged at my sleeve. "Can I have a cookie, Mommy?" Grateful for the interruption, I nodded. "Let's go pick one out together." As we stood, Patrick grabbed my wrist. "We're not finished talking." "Let go," I said evenly, glancing meaningfully at his hand until he released me. At the counter, while Emily deliberated between chocolate chip and snickerdoodle, I scanned the coffee shop reflexively. My breath caught as I spotted a familiar broad-shouldered figure at a corner table, partially hidden behind a newspaper. Mikhail. Which meant... My eyes darted around the room until they landed on him. Alexander sat at a table near the window, apparently absorbed in something on his laptop. Unlike our previous encounters, he was dressed more casually today, dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. He hadn't noticed me yet, or at least pretended not to. "I want this one," Emily declared, pointing to a massive chocolate chip cookie nearly the size of her face. "Half now, half later," I negotiated, paying the cashier. As we returned to the table with Emily's prize, I noticed Patrick's posture had changed. His shoulders were tense, his expression wary, as he stared at something over my shoulder. I didn't need to turn to know he was looking at Alexander. "Who's your friend?" Patrick asked as I slid back into the booth. "What friend?" "The guy in the corner who hasn't stopped watching you since you got up." I feigned confusion, glancing over my shoulder as if seeing Alexander for the first time. Our eyes met briefly, and he gave me a nearly imperceptible nod before returning to his laptop. "I don't know who you're talking about," I lied, turning back to Patrick. "Now, about visitation." "Don't bullshit me, Emma," Patrick hissed, leaning forward. "I know exactly who that is. What the hell are you doing mixed up with Alexander Volkov?" The color drained from my face. "You know him?" Patrick's eyes widened in disbelief. "You don't?" "Jesus, Emma. The man runs half the organized crime in this city. His family controls everything from shipping to construction to high-end real estate." My stomach dropped as pieces clicked into place. The resources, the authority, the security, the way people seemed to instinctively move out of his path. I'd accepted help from a mobster. Twice. And he'd given me a phone, arranged a scholarship for Emily, possibly even orchestrated changes at my workplace. "I barely know him," I whispered. "We met by accident. There are no accidents with men like Volkov," Patrick said, genuine fear creeping into his voice. "What does he want with you?" "Nothing," I insisted, though the word rang hollow even to my own ears. "He helped me out once when you were making a scene at the subway station, that's all." Patrick paled. "He saw me confronting you? You were drunk and shouting," I reminded him. "He just made sure Emily and I got home safely." Patrick ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting nervously to Alexander's table and back. "Listen to me carefully, Emma. You need to stay away from him. Men like Volkov don't do favors without expecting something in return." "And what would he possibly want from me?" I demanded, though a cold dread was spreading through my chest. Patrick's expression turned grim. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." Before I could respond, Emily tugged at my sleeve again. "Mommy, I need to use the bathroom." "I'll take you, sweetie," I said, grateful for another escape from this increasingly disturbing conversation. In the small bathroom, as I helped Emily wash her hands, I tried to process Patrick's revelations. Alexander Volkov, crime boss. The very thought seemed absurd when connected to the man who had treated my daughter with such gentle respect, who had arranged transportation for me without hesitation, who seemed so civilized. And yet, the signs had been there from the beginning. The bodyguard, the driver, the resources, the subtle air of danger, the way others yielded to him without question. "All clean," Emily announced, holding up her dripping hands for inspection. I smiled automatically, reaching for paper towels. "Good job, sweetie." When we returned to the table, Patrick was on his phone, his expression tense as he spoke in hushed tones. He ended the call abruptly when he saw us. "I have to go," he said, standing quickly. "Work emergency." I raised an eyebrow. "What happened to wanting regular visitation?" "We'll talk about it later," he promised, dropping a quick kiss on Emily's head. "Be good for your mom, Emmy." As he hurried toward the door, I noticed him deliberately avoid looking in Alexander's direction. Something about his sudden departure felt wrong, staged somehow. "Is Daddy leaving already?" Emily asked, disappointment evident in her voice despite her initial wariness. "He has to work," I explained, the excuse feeling as hollow as it always had. "He'll see you again soon." "That's what you always say," she replied with a child's devastating honesty. We finished our coffee shop visit, Emily contentedly nibbling her cookie while I sat in turmoil, hyper-aware of Alexander's presence across the room. When I finally gathered our things to leave, I deliberately walked toward the exit without looking in his direction. Outside, I hailed a cab, unwilling to walk or take the subway with the new knowledge weighing on me. As we pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the coffee shop window. Alexander stood watching us, his dark eyes unreadable from a distance. That evening, After putting Emily to bed, I finally allowed myself to examine the elegant phone Alexander had sent. I turned it over in my hands, wondering what sort of tracking or listening capabilities it might possess. The rationale part of me said I should throw it away, cut all ties with this dangerous man who had inserted himself into our lives. Instead, I powered it on. The screen lit up with a simple interface, no apps beyond basic functions, and, as promised, only one contact. A. My thumb hovered over it for a long moment before I set the phone aside. I needed time to think, to process what Patrick had told me, and decide how to proceed. The sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet apartment. I froze, listening intently as heavy footsteps moved through my living room. Adrenaline surged through me as I silently crossed to Emily's bed, gathering her sleeping form into my arms. She stirred, but didn't wake as I carried her to my bedroom closet, placing her gently on the floor behind hanging clothes. "Stay here, baby," I whispered, though she remained asleep. "Don't make a sound." Heart pounding, I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside my bed and crept toward the bedroom door. Through the crack, I could see shadows moving in the dimly lit living room. 2 figures, maybe 3, rifling through my belongings. "It's not here," a male voice hissed. "Check the bedroom." I backed away from the door, gripping the bat tighter. My regular phone was on the nightstand, but I'd never reach it in time to call 911. My eyes fell on the other phone, Alexander's gift, sitting on my dresser. Without hesitation, I grabbed it and pressed the single contact. It connected instantly. "Emma." Alexander's voice was alert despite the late hour, as if he'd been expecting my call. "Someone's in my apartment," I whispered, moving back toward the closet where Emily slept. "They broke in. I think they're looking for something. Where are you now?" His tone shifted to something cold and focused. "Bedroom. Emily's in the closet. They're coming this way." "Hide," he ordered. "Help is 3 minutes out. Keep this line open." I slipped into the closet, pulling the door nearly closed but leaving a small crack to see through. I placed the phone on the floor and gripped the bat with both hands, positioning myself in front of my sleeping daughter. The bedroom door eased open, and a beam of flashlight swept across the room. I held my breath as a man entered. Tall, wearing dark clothes and a ski mask. He moved directly to my dresser, opening drawers and searching through them with practiced efficiency. "Not here either," he muttered, moving to the nightstand. A second man appeared in the doorway. "Check under the bed, the closet too." My grip tightened on the bat as the first intruder approached my hiding place. The closet door began to open wider, the flashlight beam sliding across the floor toward us. In the distance, I heard sirens, still blocks away, but approaching rapidly. The men heard them too. "Cops," the second man spat. "Let's go. We haven't found it yet," protested the first. "Doesn't matter. He'll know we've been here. Mission accomplished." They retreated from the bedroom. Seconds later, I heard the apartment door open and close. Still, I remained frozen in place, bat raised, Emily sleeping peacefully behind me, unaware of how close danger had come. The phone at my feet crackled to life. "Emma?" Alexander's voice was tense. "Are you still there?" I picked it up with trembling hands. "They're gone. The police are coming." "Not police," he corrected grimly. "My men. They'll be there in 30 seconds. Let them in when they knock 3 times, pause, then twice more." True to his word, the distinctive knock came moments later. I emerged cautiously from the closet and made my way to the front door, still clutching the bat. Through the peephole, I saw Mikhail and another man I didn't recognize, both in dark suits despite the late hour. I opened the door with shaking hands. "Emily's still asleep," I said, not knowing what else to tell these men who had arrived faster than any police response I'd ever seen. Mikhail nodded. "Pack essentials for both of you. 5 minutes. You're not staying here tonight." "Where?" "Mr. Volkov will explain," he interrupted. 4 minutes now. Moving on autopilot, I returned to the bedroom and gathered Emily into my arms, still miraculously asleep. With my free hand, I stuffed pajamas, clothes, and toiletries into a backpack, along with Emily's favorite stuffed animals and a few books. When I returned to the living room, the second man was systematically checking my apartment. looking under furniture and behind picture frames. "Clean," he reported to Mikhail, who nodded once. "Let's go." Mikhail directed me toward the door. "Wait," I protested. "I don't even know where we're going." "I can't just leave in the middle of the night with my daughter." "You can," Mikhail countered. "And you will. Those men will be back, with more friends next time. This location is compromised." The cold certainty in his voice silenced my objections. He was right. We couldn't stay here. Outside, the same black SUV waited at the curb. As Mikhail opened the rear door, I saw Alexander sitting inside, his expression grave. He wore a suit despite the hour, as if he'd been in the middle of business rather than sleep when I called. "Are you hurt?" he asked, as I climbed in with Emily still cradled against me. "No, we're fine," I replied, settling Emily on my lap. "They didn't find us." Alexander's eyes softened briefly as they fell on my sleeping daughter, then hardened again as he looked to Mikhail. "Anything?" "Clean sweep, professional job. Nothing obvious left behind. Have Dimitri's team do a secondary sweep tomorrow. Full technical scan." Mikhail nodded and closed the door, taking his place in the front passenger seat. The SUV pulled smoothly away from the curb. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Somewhere safe," Alexander replied, his gaze returning to me. "I have a secure residence not far from here." "Those men," I began, then hesitated, unsure how to ask what I needed to know. "We're looking for something specific," he finished for me. "Do you know what?" I shook my head. "I don't have anything valuable." Alexander studied me carefully. "I think you know more than you realize, Emma. Your ex-husband—" "Patrick's not my husband," I corrected automatically. "We never married." Something like satisfaction flickered across Alexander's face. "Patrick, then. What exactly did he tell you about me today?" I swallowed hard, suddenly very aware of the dangerous man sitting across from me. "He said you run organized crime in the city. That your family controls shipping, construction, real estate." Alexander's expression remained impassive. "And you believed him? Should I not?" I countered, finding courage from some unknown reserve. "Are you denying it?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Would you believe any denial I made?" I considered this. "Probably not." "Then I won't insult your intelligence by offering one." He leaned forward slightly. "What matters now is that you and Emily are in danger, and I can protect you." "Why would you want to?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me since our first meeting. "Why help us at all?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes never leaving my face. "Initially, because I despise men who threaten women and children," he said finally. "Now, because your ex has made a very dangerous mistake, and you and Emily are caught in the middle." "What mistake?" "Patrick works for Nikolai Baranov," Alexander said, watching my reaction carefully. "My primary competitor in this city. The men who broke into your apartment tonight were Baranovs. They believe you have something that belongs to them, or information about where to find it." My head spun with this revelation. "I don't have anything of theirs. I haven't spoken to Patrick in months before today." "Perhaps not knowingly," Alexander conceded, "but Patrick's sudden interest in being a father again coincides suspiciously with Baranov losing something very valuable. Something Patrick had access to." The implications settled over me like a heavy blanket. "You think he hid something at my apartment? Or with Emily?" Alexander's expression darkened. "I think Patrick is desperate and cornered. Men in that position make foolish decisions." Emily stirred in my arms, her small face scrunching briefly before relaxing back into sleep. I held her tighter, protective instincts flaring. "I don't want any part of this," I said firmly. "Whatever is happening between you and this Baranov person, or between you and Patrick, it has nothing to do with us." "I'm afraid it does now," Alexander replied, his tone gentler. "But I give you my word, Emma, no harm will come to you or Emily while you're under my protection." The SUV slowed as we turned into an underground parking garage beneath a sleek high-rise building. Unlike my modest neighborhood in East Riverside, this was in the heart of downtown, where luxury apartments commanded astronomical rents. "We're here," Alexander announced as the vehicle came to a stop near a private elevator. "Welcome to one of my homes." As Mikhail opened the car door, I hesitated, suddenly aware of the enormity of what I was doing. I was about to enter the home of a man Patrick claimed was a crime boss, a man I barely knew, but who had somehow become entangled in our lives. With my sleeping daughter in my arms, I was crossing a threshold I might never be able to return from. "Emma," Alexander said softly, reading my hesitation, "I understand your fear, but right now this is the safest place for both of you." I met his gaze and saw something unexpected there, not just the cold calculation or authority I'd come to associate with him, but genuine concern, whether it was for us specifically or simply for whoever fell under his protection. I couldn't tell. But in that moment, it was enough. "Okay," I said, stepping out of the car with Emily. "But just for tonight. Tomorrow we figure out a more permanent solution." Alexander's slight smile suggested he had other ideas about our future arrangements. "Of course," he agreed smoothly, placing his hand lightly at the small of my back as he guided us toward the elevator. One step at a time, the elevator ascended silently to the top floor, Emily still miraculously asleep against my shoulder. Alexander stood beside me, his presence both reassuring and intimidating. When the doors opened, they revealed not a hallway, but a private foyer leading directly into a spacious penthouse. "This way," Alexander guided me inside, his hand returning to the small of my back. The apartment was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering city skyline, while minimalist furnishings in shades of gray, black, and deep blue gave the space a masculine but elegant feel. Everything spoke of wealth and power, from the original artwork on the walls to the clearly custom furniture. "The guest suite is through here," Alexander said, leading me down a hallway. "It has a connecting room for Emily." He opened a door to reveal a beautifully appointed bedroom with an adjoining, smaller room that had clearly been prepared for a child, complete with a small bed with guardrails and a nightlight casting star patterns on the ceiling. "You have children?" I asked, surprised by the thoughtful setup. "No," he replied simply. "I had this prepared after our first meeting." The implication sent a shiver down my spine. He'd been planning for this possibility since the night we met on the subway platform. "You can put her down," Alexander said, gesturing to the small bed. "The bathroom has everything you might need. New toothbrushes, toiletries, everything." I gently laid Emily on the bed, removing her shoes and covering her with the soft blanket. She curled onto her side, clutching her stuffed rabbit, completely unaware of our dramatic change in circumstances. "Thank you," I said, turning back to Alexander, for getting us out of there quickly. His expression remained serious. "We need to talk, but you should rest first. It's been a difficult night." "I won't be able to sleep," I admitted. "Not after what happened." Alexander nodded, as if he'd expected this answer. "Then join me when you're ready. I'll be in the living room." After he left, I took a quick shower in the luxurious ensuite bathroom, trying to wash away the fear and adrenaline. The clothes in the dresser were new, but somehow exactly my size, another unsettling detail suggesting Alexander's level of research into our lives. I selected simple black leggings and an oversized sweater, checking once more on Emily before making my way to the living room. Alexander stood by the windows, gazing out at the city below. He'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He turned at my approach, his eyes taking in my appearance with subtle appreciation. "Drink?" he offered, gesturing to a well-stocked bar cart. "Water, please," I replied, taking a seat on one of the sleek sofas. Alexander brought me a glass of water, then sat across from me. "I imagine you have questions. About 1,000,000, I agreed. "But let's start with the most important one. Are Emily and I in real danger?" "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "Baranov believes Patrick has stolen something valuable from him, information that could severely damage his operations. If he thinks you have it or know where it is, he won't stop coming after you." I rubbed my temples, fighting a headache. "But I don't have anything. I haven't seen Patrick in months before today." "That may not matter to Baranov," Alexander said, "and there's the possibility that Patrick did hide something with you, perhaps without your knowledge." A horrible thought struck me. Emily's unicorn, the toy Patrick gave her today. Alexander's expression sharpened. Where is it now? In her backpack, I think. I started to rise, but Alexander was already on his feet. Stay here, he instructed, moving swiftly down the hallway. He returned minutes later, holding the small stuffed unicorn carefully by one leg. My team will examine this. If there's anything hidden inside, they'll find it. He made a brief call, and within moments, Mikhail appeared to take the toy. Emily would be heartbroken when she discovered it missing, but I'd rather deal with a tantrum than whatever danger might be hidden in Patrick's gift. So what now? I asked after Mikhail departed with the unicorn. We can't stay here forever. I have a job. Emily has daycare. Both easily managed, Alexander replied. The medical center where you work is part of a network that my family has interests in. As for Emily's daycare, arrangements can be made. I stared at him, processing this new information. You knew where I worked before we ever met, didn't you? A slight smile played at his lips. I make it my business to know many things. Why? I demanded, frustration finally breaking through my fear. Why take any interest in me at all? I'm nobody special. Alexander set his glass down, leaning forward with an intensity that made my breath catch. You're wrong about that, Emma. From the moment you stepped behind me on that platform, ready to protect your daughter at any cost, I saw something special, something rare. His words sent an unexpected warmth through me, which I immediately tried to suppress. This man, however compelling, was dangerous, by his own admission involved in activities that had put Emily and me in our current situation. That doesn't explain why you arranged the scholarship for Emily's daycare, or why you sent a car when I was running late, or any of it, I pressed. Perhaps I saw something of myself in your situation, he offered, his expression becoming more guarded. I know what it's like to protect family against difficult odds. Before I could respond, a soft whimper came from the hallway. We both turned to see Emily standing there in her rumpled clothes, clutching her rabbit and looking confused. Mommy? Where are we? She asked, rubbing her eyes. I went to her immediately, kneeling to her level. We're staying at Alexander's house tonight, sweetie. Remember Alexander from the princess car? Emily's eyes widened as she spotted him. Instead of showing fear, she broke into a smile. Alexander! She exclaimed, as if greeting an old friend. She ran past me toward him, stopping just short of his knees and looking up. Do you live in a castle? Alexander's transformation was immediate, the hard lines of his face softening as he crouched to Emily's height. Not quite a castle, he replied seriously, but you're welcome to explore tomorrow when it's light outside. Is it a special sleepover? She asked, seemingly untroubled by our sudden relocation. Something like that, I said, joining them. It's very late, Em. You should be sleeping. I'm thirsty, she declared. I'll get you some water, Alexander offered, standing. When he returned with a small cup, Emily accepted it with a polite thank you that made him smile, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Can I show you my bunny? Emily asked him after drinking her water. His name is Hoppy. Emily, I began. Alexander is busy. I'd be honored to meet Hoppy, he interrupted, sitting on the sofa and patting the space beside him. To my amazement, Emily climbed up and began earnestly introducing her stuffed rabbit, explaining its imaginary adventures in great detail. Alexander listened with the same intensity he'd shown during our more serious conversation, asking questions and responding as if her childish stories were matters of great importance. I watched them interact, struck by the incongruity, this powerful, dangerous man completely engaged with my 3-year-old daughter's ramblings about a stuffed animal. Despite everything, I felt a treacherous warmth spreading through my chest. Where's my unicorn? Emily suddenly asked, looking around. The one Daddy gave me? Alexander's eyes met mine over her head, silently communicating. It needed to be cleaned, I improvised. You can have it back tomorrow. Emily accepted this with a child's easy faith, returning to her conversation with Alexander. After a few more minutes, her eyelids began to droop. Time for bed, I announced, standing. Can Alexander tuck me in too? She asked sleepily. I hesitated, but Alexander was already nodding. If your mother agrees. I couldn't deny the hope in Emily's eyes. Just this once, I conceded. Together, we walked Emily back to her room. I helped her change into the new pajamas that had mysteriously appeared in the right size. then lifted her into the small bed. Alexander stood nearby, watching with an unreadable expression as I kissed her forehead. "Your turn," Emily instructed him imperiously, pointing to her other cheek. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, emotion quickly controlled, as he bent and gently kissed her cheek. "Sleep well, little one." "Night-night," she murmured, already drifting off. We left quietly, closing the door partway. In the hallway, Alexander paused, his usual composure momentarily disturbed. "She's remarkable," he said softly. "Like her mother." The compliment flustered me. "She's just a normal kid." "No," he contradicted, his gaze intense. "There's nothing ordinary about either of you." We returned to the living room in silence, the atmosphere between us charged with something I couldn't, or wouldn't, name. "You should rest," Alexander said, glancing at his watch. "It's nearly 3 a.m. What about Patrick?" I asked. "And those men? What happens tomorrow?" "My team is tracking Patrick's movements. As for Baranov's men, they won't find you here." "That's not a long-term solution," I pointed out. "No," he agreed, "but it gives us time to develop one." "Us?" I echoed. "Alexander, I appreciate everything you've done, but this isn't my world. Emily and I can't just disappear into whatever this is." I gestured around the luxurious apartment. His expression hardened slightly. "Would you prefer I return you to your apartment where Baranov's men can find you? Where your daughter's safety would be at risk every moment?" "Of course not," I snapped, frustration boiling over. "But there has to be another option. Protective custody, maybe, or—" "The police cannot protect you from Baranov," Alexander interrupted. "Not effectively. And the moment you enter the system, he'll find you." "So what then? We just live here indefinitely? I become your—" "What exactly?" The implication hung heavy between us. Alexander's eyes darkened. "I've offered you protection, Emma. Nothing more, nothing less. And why would you do that? What do you get out of it?" I challenged. "Perhaps satisfaction in thwarting Baranov," he suggested, though his tone suggested more complicated motives. "I don't believe you," I said flatly. "Men like you don't do things without expecting something in return." Patrick said as much. Alexander's mouth twisted in a humorless smile. "And Patrick is such a reliable source." "At least he was honest about who you are," I retorted. "Was he?" Alexander moved closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming. "Did he tell you that he's been working for Baranov for years? That he's been involved in everything from extortion to trafficking? That the new job he's so proud of involves hurting people who cross his boss?" I stepped back, shaken by his intensity. "No. Of course not, because Patrick only tells you what serves his purposes." Alexander's voice was low, but vibrating with controlled anger. "Just as he only shows interest in his daughter when it benefits him." The truth of this statement stung, even as I bristled at his presumption. "You don't know anything about us. I know more than you think," he countered. "I know you work extra shifts to afford Emily's daycare. I know you moved 3 times in the past 2 years trying to create stability. I know Patrick has contributed exactly $1,700 in child support over 3 years, despite claiming earnings that should have required far more." My mouth fell open in shock. "How could you possibly know that?" "As I said, I make it my business to know things." Alexander's expression softened marginally, "especially about people who matter." "I don't matter to you," I insisted, even as something inside me wavered. "You don't even know me." "I'd like to," he said simply. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. For a moment, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior, a flash of something genuine that made him seem suddenly human, rather than the dangerous figure Patrick had described. "Get some rest, Emma," he said after a moment of charged silence. "Tomorrow will bring enough challenges." With that, he turned and walked toward what I assumed was the master suite, leaving me alone with my turbulent thoughts. I sank onto the sofa, exhausted but too wired to sleep. How had my life changed so dramatically in just 3 days, from struggling single mother to, what, protected guest of a man who controlled half the city's criminal enterprises? A man who had arranged scholarships for my daughter, who listened to her stories about stuffed animals as if they were boardroom presentations, who looked at me with an intensity that made my heart race, despite every rational warning bell in my head. I thought of Patrick's accusations and Alexander's counterpoints. Neither man was what he seemed on the surface, but at least Alexander had been honest about his dishonesty. He hadn't denied Patrick's claims about his activities, hadn't tried to paint himself as something he wasn't. And then there was Emily, my bright, resilient daughter, who had inexplicably bonded with this dangerous man after just 2 brief meetings. Her instincts about people were usually sound, far better than my own clearly questionable judgment. As dawn began to break over the city skyline, I finally made my way to the guest room, slipping into bed beside Emily. Whatever tomorrow brought, at least tonight we were safe, and in my world, safety, even temporary, even from a questionable source, was a luxury I couldn't afford to reject. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows when I opened my eyes. Emily wasn't beside me, and panic jolted me fully awake. I leapt from bed and rushed into the hallway, following the sound of childish laughter to the kitchen. The scene that greeted me was surreal. Emily sat at the massive marble island, solemnly stirring pancake batter while Alexander stood beside her, one hand steadying the bowl. She wore a chef's hat that comically dwarfed her small head. "More blueberries?" Alexander asked her, his voice carrying a warmth I'd never heard before. "Yes, please," Emily replied enthusiastically. "Mommy loves blueberries." Neither had noticed me yet, and I found myself frozen, captivated by the domestic tableau. Alexander wore dark jeans and a simple gray Henley that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence, yet his demeanor with Emily was gentle, patient. He moved with the same controlled precision I'd observed before, but softened, adapted to accommodate a child's help. "Good morning," I finally said, stepping into the kitchen. Emily's face lit up. "Mommy, we're making surprise pancakes. Alexander knows how to flip them in the air." "Does he now?" I raised an eyebrow at the crime boss turned breakfast chef. Something resembling embarrassment flickered across Alexander's face before he masked it with a smile. Emily woke early. I thought breakfast might be welcome after last night. "It is," I admitted, accepting the mug of coffee he offered. "Thank you." As I sipped the perfectly brewed coffee, I observed Alexander with my daughter. He guided her hands as she attempted to pour batter onto the griddle, praising her efforts regardless of the misshapen results. Emily glowed under his attention, chattering away about her favorite breakfasts, her preschool friends, her stuffed animals, a stream of consciousness that Alexander seemed genuinely interested in following. "Where's my unicorn?" she asked suddenly, looking up at Alexander. "Mommy said it was getting cleaned." Alexander's eyes met mine over her head. "It's still being cleaned," he said smoothly, "but I have something for you in the meantime." He reached into a drawer and produced a small silver bracelet with tiny charms, a rabbit, a star, and what looked like a unicorn. "This is very special," he told Emily as he fastened it around her small wrist. "It matches your bunny, see? And if you press this button here," he demonstrated, and the star charm lit up with a soft blue glow. "You can always find your way in the dark." Emily stared at the bracelet in wonder. "It's magic." "Something like that," he agreed, his eyes flicking to me with a message I understood immediately. The bracelet contained some sort of tracker. "What do you say, Emily?" I prompted. "Thank you, Alexander." She threw her arms around his legs in an impulsive hug. For a moment, Alexander seemed frozen, genuinely caught off guard by the child's affection. Then, hesitantly, he placed a hand on her head in an awkward but gentle pat. "You're welcome, little one." The moment was interrupted by Mikhail's arrival. He nodded respectfully to Alexander, then glanced at me. "Sir, we found it," he said simply. Alexander's demeanor shifted instantly. "Emma, perhaps Emily would enjoy watching cartoons in the media room while we talk." Understanding the gravity of the situation, I nodded. "Come on, Em. Let's find something to watch while the pancakes cool." After settling Emily in front of a large television playing animated movies, I returned to find Alexander and Mikhail in intense conversation. They stopped when I entered. "What did you find?" I asked, crossing my arms defensively. Alexander gestured to the kitchen table where the unicorn toy sat beside a small flash drive. "This was sewn inside," he explained. "It contains encrypted files, financial records, transaction details, client lists, everything needed to dismantle Baranov's operation." And implicate Patrick, Mikhail added gruffly. I sank into a chair, staring at the innocuous-looking drive. He used our daughter as a mule, I whispered, anger building inside me. He put her in danger to save himself. Yes, Alexander confirmed, his voice hard. When his theft was discovered, he needed somewhere to hide the evidence, somewhere Baranov wouldn't immediately look. But why give it to Emily? Why not just leave it at my apartment? Because he knew Baranov would search your place, Alexander explained. But a child's toy? Given in public? Less obvious. What happens now? I asked, dreading the answer. Alexander took the seat across from me. I have the evidence I need against Baranov. My organization can move against his immediately. And Patrick? Something cold and calculating entered Alexander's expression. That depends partly on you. On me? How? Patrick betrayed Baranov, which makes him a dead man walking, he said bluntly. But he's also Emily's father. If you wish him protected, for her sake, I can arrange it. The implication stunned me. Alexander was offering to spare Patrick's life based solely on my preference, on what might be best for Emily. The power he wielded so casually was terrifying, yet the consideration behind the offer was undeniable. I don't want Emily to lose her father, I said slowly, no matter how inconsistent or unreliable he's been. But I also don't want him anywhere near us after what he did. Alexander nodded, as if my answer confirmed something for him. He can be relocated, given a new identity. He would need to stay away from both of you permanently, but he would be alive. You'd do that? Even though he stole from your competitor? I still struggled to find appropriate terminology for the criminal world I'd stumbled into. I would do it for Emily, Alexander said simply, and for you. The intensity in his gaze made me look away. What about us? Emily and me. You have options, he replied carefully. You could return to your life with enhanced security, new apartment, new routines, my people watching over you. Or... He hesitated. Or? I prompted. You could stay, he said quietly. Under my protection. Permanently. The implication hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about safety anymore. It was about something more. Alexander, I began, uncertain how to respond. I barely know you. And what I do know is complicated. Yes, he agreed without apology. I am complicated. My life is complicated. I won't pretend otherwise. You're involved in criminal activities, I stated plainly. My family business operates in many spheres, he countered. Some legitimate, some in gray areas, some that cross lines. I won't lie to you about that. Then why would I even consider staying? I challenged. Why would I bring my daughter into that world? Alexander leaned forward, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. Because despite what you think, I can offer Emily security, stability, opportunities she deserves, and I can offer you something I suspect you've never had. Someone who puts you first, who values your strength, and protects your vulnerabilities, without trying to change who you are. His words struck deeper than I wanted to admit. Patrick had always tried to mold me into someone else. More fun, less responsible, more accommodating to his lifestyle. My parents, before they passed, had pushed me toward a life I never wanted. Alexander, for all his danger and darkness, had accepted me exactly as I was from the first moment. I need time, I said finally. This is too much, too fast. Of course, he agreed, leaning back. Take all the time you need. My offer stands regardless. Mikhail cleared his throat. Sir, the operation is ready when you are. Alexander nodded. I'll be there shortly. He turned back to me. I need to handle this situation with Baranov. You and Emily will be safe here. Svetlana will arrive soon to assist with anything you need. Who's Svetlana? My sister, Alexander said, rising from his chair. She's good with children. Emily will like her. Before I could process this new information, Alexander had a sister, he continued. One more thing, Emma. Whatever you decide about your future, know that you and Emily will always have my protection. That is non-negotiable. With that declaration, he strode from the room, Mikhail following in his wake, leaving me with a head spinning from possibilities I'd never considered. Svetlana arrived an hour later, a striking woman with Alexander's dark eyes but a warmer demeanor. She immediately won Emily over with a bag of art supplies and stories about growing up in Russia. While Emily drew pictures, Svetlana joined me on the balcony. "My brother rarely brings anyone here," she observed, studying me with interest. "You must be special. Or just in special danger," I countered. She laughed, a surprisingly musical sound. "With Alexander, those aren't mutually exclusive. He told me about his business," I said carefully. "Did he?" She raised an eyebrow. "That's even more significant. Alexander guards his privacy fiercely." "I don't know what to do," I admitted, surprising myself with this candor to a stranger. Svetlana's expression softened. "My brother can be intense, overwhelming, but he is also the most loyal person I know. If he has offered you protection, it's not temporary or conditional. That's what concerns me," I murmured. "The permanence of it all." "May I offer some perspective?" When I nodded, she continued. "Our father was like Alexander. Powerful, dangerous to his enemies, but fiercely protective of family. Our mother chose that life with open eyes, and while it wasn't always easy, she never regretted it. She knew his darkness but also saw his capacity for love, the depth that few others ever glimpsed. I thought of Alexander helping Emily make pancakes, listening to her stories about Hoppy the rabbit, the gentleness in his expression when he thought no one was watching. "Your daughter seems to have discovered that side of him already," Svetlana noted, glancing through the glass doors where Emily was happily drawing. "Children often see what adults miss." Before I could respond, my phone, my regular phone, rang. Patrick's name flashed on the screen. "Should I answer it?" I asked Svetlana. "Alexander would want to know what he says," she replied pragmatically. I accepted the call, putting it on speaker. "Patrick." "Emma, thank God!" His voice sounded panicked. "Where are you? Where's Emily? You weren't at the apartment." "We're safe," I said neutrally, watching Svetlana send a text, presumably to Alexander. "You have to listen to me," Patrick rushed on. "You're in danger. Volkov is dangerous. So is hiding stolen information in your daughter's toy," I interrupted coldly. Silence fell on the other end of the line. "Emma, I can explain." "Don't bother," I cut him off. "Alexander found the flash drive. He knows everything." "Oh God," Patrick's voice broke. "Emma, you don't understand what this means. If Volkov has those files, I'm a dead man. You have to help me." The desperation in his voice might once have moved me, but now I felt only a cold anger. "Help you? After you used our daughter as a shield? After you put her in danger to save yourself? I didn't have a choice," he protested. "Baranov would have killed me on the spot. I was going to come back for it, make things right." "Like you've made things right so many times before?" I challenged. "No more, Patrick. No more promises, no more chances." "Please, Emma," he begged, "for Emily's sake. She needs her father." "What she needs is someone who puts her welfare above their own," I replied, thinking of Alexander's protective instincts, how they had extended to Emily from their first meeting. "You've never been that person." Svetlana nodded approvingly as Patrick continued to plead. Finally, I'd had enough. "Goodbye, Patrick," I said firmly. "Wait," he shouted. "Just tell me one thing. Is Volkov there? Are you with him right now?" I looked at Svetlana, who nodded slightly. "No, but I'm with his sister, and I've made my choice." I ended the call, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. For years I'd carried Patrick's inconsistency, his broken promises, his manipulation. Finally I was setting down that burden. Svetlana smiled. "My brother will be pleased. I haven't agreed to stay," I pointed out. "Haven't you?" She countered gently. The rest of the day passed in a strange, peaceful bubble. Emily took to Svetlana immediately, delighting in learning Russian words and hearing stories about Alexander when he was little. I found myself relaxing despite the circumstances, drawn into their warmth. Alexander returned as evening fell, looking tired but satisfied. "It's done," he told me quietly after Emily had gone to bed. "Baranov's organization has been dismantled. He'll be in federal custody by morning. And Patrick? Being transported to a safe location as we speak. New identity, new start. Far from here, as agreed." Relief washed through me. "Thank you," I said simply. Alexander studied me intently. "Have you thought about my offer?" I nodded, having reached my decision hours earlier. Emily and I will stay, for now, on a trial basis. I need to understand what this life really means before I commit to anything permanent. Something like joy flickered in Alexander's usually guarded eyes. That's all I ask. Time to show you what's possible. He reached out, hesitantly taking my hand in his. His touch was warm. The slight calluses I'd noticed before a reminder that this powerful man had not been born to wealth, but had fought his way to it. I meant what I said before, Emma. You and Emily will always be protected, regardless of what develops between us. And what do you think might develop? I asked, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. Alexander's smile held promise rather than his usual calculation. Something worth building a future around. As I looked into his eyes, I realized we had already begun constructing that future, from the moment he stood between Patrick and me on that subway platform, through each protective gesture, each genuine connection with Emily, each truth revealed despite the risk. I didn't know if I was making the right choice. Alexander's world was dangerous, complicated, outside everything I'd known, but as he held my hand in the quiet penthouse, with my daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time in years, I wasn't facing the future alone, and neither was Emily. Whatever came next, we would face it together, one step at a time.